So this one's really, really interesting. It started when I received an email from our contact address, 23rd of June 2025, comes from a guy called Harry Mingham. I'm just going to read his email. Hi to whomever this concerns. It's another one of these very sort of posh greetings. I love it. Anyway, hi to whomever this concerns. I found out something rather interesting that I can't find anybody talking about online in any forums. As a lot of people know, including yourself, Hitman World of Assassination on Switch 2 runs around 30 to 45 FPS around 90% of the time. Out of curiosity, I went into the system menus and dropped the TV output resolution from 4K to 720p, and went back into the game and found it vastly improves performance. The Hawke's Bay mission ran at what I could tell a very solid and stable frame rate. I just find this interesting as I couldn't find anyone talking about it. Anyway, thank you for reading, and I hope this reaches the right audience and people. Harry. Well, I looked into Harry's claims because for the most part, developers tend to target like a performance mode or a quality mode, or more commonly, just a resolution, right? And but Harry is absolutely right. We've got some Hitman 2 assets here that I took that show basically as close to like for like comparisons as possible. And all I've done is for each run, I've gone back. I didn't even close the game, right? For each run, I just finished the run, went to the Switch menus, adjusted the resolution, went straight back to the game, no reloads or anything. And it turns out that Harry is absolutely on the money here. The game does change resolution according to the system menus. The way it does it is quite interesting. I guess let's look at the Whittleton Creek, I think, which is the area that seems to be the most GPU limited. And you can see that on Switch 2 with the system menus at 720p, it's basically a locked 60 frames per second in what is quite a taxing area, actually. However, if you go and change the system menus to 1080p, that kind of drops into the 30s. And then something weirder still is that you drop down, you move up rather to 2160p on the system menus, and you get a drop in performance versus 1080p. So we've got three clear resolution or rendering targets here based on what the system menus are doing. And if we actually look at the performance differentials for that particular level, well, what can I say? The 720p version, 62.5% faster than the 4K version. 1080p, 9.7% faster than the 4K version. And Alex did some pixel counts here because the gap between 1080p and 720p kind of explainable, right? It's running at a different resolution, but there's some weird things happening on pixel counts, right?
Right. Well, John helped with this too, and we both came to the conclusion that in the 4K image, you're getting a slightly higher than 50% on access. Mm-hmm. A little bit above. I think what was it? It was like 21 out of
40 steps, or like 16 out of 30 steps. So like 1152p, that somewhere in that range, basically.
Yeah.
Right. And in the 1080p mode, oddly enough, the pixel counts you get back, you can count super sampling in a game, and it looks a little bit super sampled.
Very slightly.
It's like ever so slightly super sampled. The pixels are not fully aligning. And so if I were to take a guess, based upon the image characteristics of that 4K image, it does look like DLSS is on there. And in the 1080p image, it's hard to tell, but it is not getting that upscale, is what I think. And I think what we're seeing there between the 1080p and the 4K is essentially the cost of upscaling to 4K from that same image resolution, which would be cool because that would be meaning we're getting, well, potentially the cost of DLSS versus the normal image treatment. Which would be really cool to actually see. And maybe that is a really, at least in the non-CPU bound areas, that would be a really cool measurement to have for future purposes to talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting stuff. Going to Berlin, which is another area which seems to be like GPU heavy. Let's take a look at the results there. A 7% performance lead for 1080p over 4K. So again, the cost of DLSS factored in there. 61% 720p versus 4K there. So yeah, obviously it is a lot smoother. You can hit 60 frames per second before you go into that forest area where performance sort of tanks at that point. This is a very, very heavy level that actually drops frames on very rarely, but drops frames on the PlayStation 5 version, which is kind of why I chose it. We sort of know some of the pressure points of Hitman from reviews gone by. And but I also wanted to see potential CPU limitations as well. So if you look at this capture here from the Mumbai level, there is still like a distinct pecking order between the three runs that we've got here. But this time 720p is only 28% faster than 4K. But it seems to be the case that the 1080p version is about 10% faster. So, yeah, I mean, basically it does seem to be the case that you're losing about 9% of performance using that upscaling technique that 2160p is using there. But Alex, would you say it looks DLSS-like, or do you think this is the mythical tiny DLSS or DLSS-like?
Oh, man. Well, it isn't great looking necessarily. I would say it did look a little bit rough, but that could be coming down to a lot of features because it looks really over-sharpened. Yeah, oddly enough, it looks so sharp in a way that is uncanny.
Handheld is particularly egregious in terms of sharpening, by the way.
Yeah, and the thing that gives me DLSS vibes about it, we're in this stage of life where we see DLSS vibes, is
there's a lot of vibes in the current era, isn't there?
Vibes.
Yeah, something about it. I don't know where this is coming from. Are some of the disocclusion lines looking wobbly? And that's a typical characteristic of DLSS, where it doesn't leave a raw edge. Rather, it kind of makes each alias pixel look like a wave instead, and it's like kind of smoothed over. I think it looks a lot more attractive than just like the way FSR used to do it, for example. And I think that's what we're seeing here, at least in the 4K footage. The 1080p footage is a lot harder to guess at what is the image quality treatment, but I think with enough back and forths, we could discover whether it is the same or different than what we saw above by looking for areas where DLSS fails and produces, for example, a specific type of ghosting. And if they have different styles of ghosting in the same area, then we would know that they're different techniques or the same technique, just with a different output res.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also took a look at the Paris level where I was hoping, I'll be fully open with you, I was hoping to see that all three lines would be exactly the same, which would indicate that we're CPU limited. Because historically, basically in Hitman, you put hundreds of NPCs into one place and you're CPU limited. But, actually seems to be the case that although the performance differential is depressed, it's a 33% advantage for 720p over the 4K, and 1080p has a 10% advantage. So there seems to be this sort of recurring, I guess it's going to come down to content possibly, but most of the results here are suggesting the 1080p version is like 10% faster. In this case with Paris, possibly at 720p, we are actually hitting the CPU limit there. Mm-hmm. But that's not too bad. That was a 47.9 FPS average on the Paris stage there at 720p, dropping to 36.1. I mean, here's the thing, right? This has got to be a specific behavior that was developed by IO Interactive for this version of the game. I think what surprises me is that it seems to be checking it in-game all the time, to the point where you can actually go back to the system menus, swap the resolution, and it's immediately reflected in-game. On the there's quite a lot of PS4 Pro games where you get a different presentation depending on whether the console is selected at 4K and 1080p. But typically the check is only done at boot, so you can switch back to the higher resolution output later in game, but it makes no difference apart from the display scaler kicking in. But here it seems to be a real-time check happening, which makes me wonder whether it's a Switch 2 thing. Maybe there's something we should be looking at more often in games, or whether it's specifically an IO Interactive thing. If it's an IO Interactive thing, I kind of think they should have had these options in game. It's just like adjust the resolution to what you want, trade image quality versus performance. I've got to say, though, that 720p looks pretty rough to my eyes. obvious reasons. And that's kind of one of the things I think Switch 2 has actually done a pretty good job of. The main point that I didn't really like, I mean, I use Switch 1 exclusively as a handheld because those games just didn't look great for the most part on a 4K screen. But I think Switch 2, one of the things it has achieved quite well is that it does actually display games quite nicely on a modern TV. But yeah, in this case, it's like, well, surely this should have been an option in game. Don't know what you think, John.
Yeah, it should have been for sure. Wow, actually, though, while you were talking, I pulled up my original coverage here of Hitman because I feel like I've been looking at this level for so long, and it turns out
one? The Paris,
the Paris one.
Yeah.
And it's good. My original piece on this goes back to March 10th, 2016. And looking at the video I forgot. Like, so yes, PS4 and Xbox One were both uncapped, I guess. Yep. And Xbox One drops to like 21 FPS or something during the... Wow, the whole intro boat is very, very, very slow on Xbox One. So
yeah,
for some reason in my head, I was like, the Switch 2 version is just running like the original last-gen version. But it turns out Switch 2 version is noticeably better than those. Wow, it drops to 15 FPS. Oh, wow, it was... wow, what the heck, man? The Xbox One version was bad. I forgot about that. So the Switch 2 version seems to perform similarly to PS4 original, but with, I guess, higher resolution output overall, or at least somewhat. I mean, there's that extra sharpening where the PS4 version just seems to be straight 1080p.
Yeah.
With like a post-process AA.
Yeah, it had a strange AA. It was SMAA 1TX, which is normal SMAA, but then when the camera moves, it blurs in the direction of the camera movement.
Oh my
really
gosh.
Bizarre. But
it's just so interesting to see this all these years. It's 9 years later, more than 9 years later, and we're still looking at this game. Is there any game that has managed to persist this long with new versions in this way? I
don't know.
Like, I feel like more than any other game we've ever really covered, like this one is just continues to live on.
GTA 5?
That and Final Fantasy that Mark covered, right? Or was it Corey? I forget.
Mark, 14. Oh, that's Mark. An MMO, right? So that's GTA 5 is probably the only other one. Then that's a good point, Rich. So that means Hitman's support is kind of on par with GTA 5, which also has an online component. Hitman is a single player game, really. So
yeah,
I don't know. It's just interesting that IO has managed to keep it going for so long to the point where they changed publisher, or like they bought themselves out and went independent, I believe, since this came out. So I don't know. It's cool to see. I'm happy this is on Switch 2, but I would say that an optional 30 FPS cap would probably make this feel a lot more enjoyable in the meantime.
But yeah, there is actually a patch coming in the summer to address what have been described as stuttering issues. But I think the only stuttering I've actually seen to date on the game has been when you're going in and out of VRR in handheld mode. That was in the review video that we put together for the Switch 2. It's very, very odd and quite disconcerting. And maybe it's another one of these games that's running in a VRR in a 60 hertz container.
Yeah, if they allow 120 hertz container support for this game, that would actually solve it in handheld mode at least.
Or maybe there's more to it because we haven't put a huge amount of time into the game, but it seems to be, a pretty good version of Hitman from what I can see.
Yeah.
So I napkin mathed it really quickly. It appears that the frame time differential between 4K and 1080p here is 2.8 milliseconds, roughly.
That's pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah. Then let's see if that continues. If we see other examples, maybe there's a game that allows you to turn off DLSS in the future, kind of like we saw games that allowed you to turn off PSSR on the PlayStation 5 Pro. Or, maybe let's track this. But 2.8 is an interesting number, 2.8 milliseconds, roughly.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Final point here. Question from Anxiously Chronoed Figured. Hello there. Games using the output resolution you set up in the display settings seems like quite an easy thing to implement, or am I wrong? Why don't we see it more often? Cheers. I think the point is that you shouldn't have specific graphics modes dependent on settings that are entirely outside of the game, because you'll never know that they're there. That's the key thing. That's this is why this whole Hitman story is a story, because it's essentially an Easter egg. Because what can we say? We had a guy email in saying, "Hey, check this out." Harry there did a fantastic job, so thanks to Harry. But really, it shouldn't be any sort of secrecy around display modes here. It should just be something that's maybe, dare I suggest it, in a video settings option menu. But obviously we'll hope to check out more soon on Hitman. Maybe we should wait now until this summer patch comes along. But, IO is now on the record saying that the James Bond game is going to be coming to Switch 2 as well, which is pretty fantastic. It's great to see a proprietary engine, Glacier, there, still powering on. No UE5 there.
Glacier.